Hello, everyone. This is episode 50. Woo! We reached 50 episodes of the Dresden Files podcast, a member of the Broken Jars Network. We've got a little bit of news, mostly the biggest thing. I'm so sorry, Andreas, but Briefcases isn't coming out until spring of 2018. Yes, this is the sound of annoyance because we were so hopeful that we'd get it as a Christmas stocking, but
I was really hoping on Christmas Eve I would get that as a present, an audio or book. I don't really care. And I'm just like, yeah, okay, whatever, go away. Peace talks.
Yeah, it is just the bigger worry that we're not going to get Peace Talks until after Briefcases, because we've always assumed Briefcases comes first. But if we're not getting that until next spring, we're worried. But the other news is little bits coming out of Dragon Con, which Jim attended, as he always does. I think he said it's his favorite con. And there was a nice little description of some of the stuff he went over. It seemed like everything was old news or people asking repetitive questions that we already knew. So the two new things that we saw was that Morgan's parents were killed by Kemmler or some other big bad necromancer. And let's just talk about that one for a minute, because that's pretty interesting.
Right. Technically the guy who answered that question said that they were killed by like the Dark Lord or something like that. So for all we know, it was Voldemort. But without actually like listening to or hearing the direct answer, what it sounds like to me is that it's probably Kemmler or one of his disciples. Basically, they pulled a Neville on Morgan, right? They made him the other boy who lived, in a way, right? So I'm going to get to Harry Potter with this if I keep going. But the point is, they killed his parents, presumably while Lucio was following them in the West. If you're up on Fistful of Warlocks, and she rides off into the sunset, but unfortunately not, to the end of the story. So while he's on the run, I presume he kills Morgan's parents. Lucio probably finds him and then arranges to have him, raised / she will take him on as the apprentice. So we were doing research, and Priscilla had posted some answers when we had done that episode for Fistful of Warlocks as well. We got a better idea of the timeline because she had to go back to Jim to clarify what the timeline was and things like that. So if you look that post up on Reddit, you'll get some good detail. But it's pretty exciting because this takes it from Donald Morgan is the asshole cop, which unfortunately is too much in the news these days, right? He's the guy who got burned out, who is trigger happy and whatever, that Dresden sees him as in Dead Beat, and then eventually in Turncoat as well. But it also makes him like, no wonder he fucking like has almost a phobia reaction to warlocks and black magic and necromancy that fucking killed his parents. Like, holy crap. Like, that's a huge reveal.
Yeah, and based on the little time stuff that she put when we were discussing Fistful of Warlocks, like if Fistful of Warlocks happened in like the 1800s, mid 1880s, I think 83, 85, something like that, and he basically missed the Wild West, but he could have been born around that time, and then she goes and saves him around the time he might have been starting to manifest issues, or maybe the necromancers tracked him down trying to take advantage of him, and she found him by accident at the same time.
Yeah, 1880s is kind of like leaning towards the end of the Wild West, right? When did that period end, approximately?
I don't know if there's a hard date, but yeah, it seems like when it became 1900s, that's a pretty good day of it ending.
Well, so without going the back and forth that she posted here, the summary of her post is that after writing part 1, he revised the date, informing the betas it was set May 31st, 1883. So Morgan was probably born, but he wasn't likely to be of apprenticing age. So
for a couple of years old, you have to remember, right? To have trauma, like of course you can be like, my parents were killed.
Exactly, like it's even Bruce Wayne knows at some point, right? And I mean, I guess he would have been
Bruce
older.
Wayne
but
was
still,
old enough. That's what I mean.
The point is that you don't grow up and be like, oh, you're not my real mom. What happened to my parents? Oh, nothing. They went on vacation and left you at home. Like she's gonna tell him that story.
No, but someone who can't remember what happened, say your parents were in a car accident. maybe you were there, but you're too young to remember. Would you be afraid of cars? I don't
This
think
is
you would. I
different,
think you
though.
would if you can remember.
I mean, yeah, I use the word phobia, but I mean, it's not. He's obviously not afraid of dark wizards. To our evidence, he's not afraid of anything. But he has such a strong reaction. Like it's definitely fueled his hunger and probably his lust for being such a badass fighter and things like that. Like I mean, he's Inigo Montoya, right? Spent the last 20 years learning how to fight just to avenge my parents. Except for Morgan, it was 150.
I really need to watch that.
However old he was, right? So
wait, hold on.
he was like 80, wasn't he?
I have to spend a minute. Andreas, have you never seen The Princess Bride?
No, it's just like
you don't get to throw that card.
So, but I want to watch it. I know I've heard.
There have been direct references to it in the Dresden Files.
Yeah, I know. I mean, you hear the references everywhere, so I know the references, but I haven't seen that movie.
Shame on you. Watch that movie.
I'm probably gonna.
Go back to talking about Morgan.
So, since you're throwing around that card, did you see the point where Jim Butcher thinks that Darth Whedon is his favorite Sith?
He can like that. I can dislike it. It's a free country.
Who's Darth Whedon?
So it was on the somebody had posted a link to the Evil Writers. There's like a Evil Writers blog, and they had done an interview with Butcher actually relatively recently, and I hadn't read it. And they were like, "Well, what makes you so evil, and who's your evil master? Like, who do you take lessons from? That sort of thing." Darth Whedon. Yeah. So freaking get over it already, director.
Who is that?
Joss Whedon, but as a Sith. Or Darth Whedon.
Like that. Yeah. Okay, now I get it. Okay, cool. Because I was just taking it very literal. I was like, is there a Sith Lord in the Star Wars universe called Darth Whedon?
Yes, there is now.
I'm a very literal person. Okay, I just take things at face value.
Right.
But I mean, Joss Whedon is one of the best writers in TV and cinema. So
you're not going to change my opinion on him. It's okay. Everyone else can like him. I just didn't really. It wasn't for me.
No, but I mean, who cares? I mean, your tastes anyway are fucked. You think Ghost Story is one of the better books?
Yeah.
Actually,
they're all good. But
let's get back on track here because this is interesting too. So, FDCT from the Dresden Files subreddit posted one where it's Priscilla. How old was Morgan in 1886? 3. Okay, well, I can't use him in this story. Thank you. So that was Jim at MalCon 2016. Apparently, there's actually a link to the video and everything like that. So he was born in 1883, right? Mm-hmm. So, and I mean, then you've got to play around with the fact that what year does the Dresden Files actually take place in and things like that. So they were saying Harry was born in like 1979 is the best guess, right?
I thought it was 75, but
was it 75? Okay. Unfortunately, the forums are down, so I can't get to all of that information. Apparently, I need to take my own wiki.
Speaking of peace talks being delayed, until before Cold Days, I guess it was, when the books came out once a year, I always had it in my head that they were pretty, like, the first book, the year it came out is the year it happens, and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's actually, I think that they're about roughly 5 years behind us. I'm not sure why. I think, but I think the first book is supposed to happen around 2000, 2001, and Harry's supposed to be about 25.
Right.
And then it's just kind of going along roughly once a year, but sometimes it's like 3 months later, sometimes it's 2 years later, but roughly once a year.
So only until recently.
And right? You messed up some things that were like 6 months after, and then like a year and a half ago. It just various things like that. But back with Morgan, if he was born in 83, then Lucio must have found him significantly later, because Priscilla says that he probably didn't manifest any of his energies until about 15, and Harry was just really, really young, which makes sense.
Well, she says that apprenticing age, most wizards manifest around 15. So not even, that has nothing to do with Morgan. And unless she got an inside, we wouldn't know for sure. But yeah, so that's what I'm saying. Like, so he was probably an infant, or around like 1, but probably an infant, because we're saying 1883. So if he was born, if this happened all in the same thing, and it's possible it took a couple years for her to catch up and him to have all this happen, right? So somewhere from infant to toddler range, she probably had him cared for a while, but like, I doubt she just fell off
kept
the
an eye on him or something, and then
Exactly.
discovered he had magical powers, or suspected because his parents most likely had some sort of powers.
I mean, that's possible, but it seems roughly a little random, because we only have very few examples of someone who has a child with magical potential.
It usually passes through the female line, right? Like if there's a female practitioner of some
It is-
variety, they can give birth to a white council level wizard.
Yeah, he did say that that's more common, but then there's like Margaret had her father as being the practitioner. We don't think that her
Right.
I
mother.
mean, he's a very
was a
powerful wizard, but the mother could have been a wizard too. We don't
but I'm
know.
pretty.
I
I
don't
think,
think she was.
it's actually a word of Jim that she was just
a normal vanilla
so-
person.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it can go through the father's line too. It's just more common with the female line.
Yeah.
That's
But then we don't know, like, who are Lucio's parents? Why does Lucio have the magical ability?
right. Well, and
Or-
as we were discussing earlier, we couldn't recall if anybody ever talks about who her master was. So who did she learn from? Because we're starting, like, Andreas and I didn't realize, didn't remember the whole the Petrovich connection with Justin Demorne and everything like that. So it's like, yeah, suddenly this is all becoming important. Unfortunately, kind of like almost Harry Potter important, right? Like, who taught who and what happened. And I mean, Star Wars did the same thing, where it was like Yoda taught the Sith line, if you follow that. Like, he taught Darth Tyrannus, who taught Qui-Gon, who taught Obi-Wan, who taught Anakin, type of stuff. And that might
Yoda's
be
a fucking
important.
Sith. Fuck.
I know, right? He was in on
Yeah.
it the whole time. But yeah, that's starting to seem pretty important to the Dresden Files, especially with one of the other tidbits from the Q&A, which I think had been hinted at before, but people felt was a big bombshell, was something along the lines of Ebenezer has done questionable things and he will again, type of stuff, and hinting that there might be an actual showdown between him and Harry of some kind. So,
Maybe over
There's-
Thomas?
well, I mean, hopefully, but yeah, like, honestly, because that one's like the known quantity. We've known that's been coming since like Blood Rights,
Yeah.
So
I mean,
that
I'd also really like just to maybe see Ebenezer showdown against maybe Langtree. Like, if they come to head about something they both think is important, that would be
Like
spectacular.
Langtree think it's important to kill Harry, and Ebenezer thinks maybe not.
Yeah.
they did that this one time. They called it the French and Indian War. So I'm just saying,
They didn't exactly agree on that.
right? They were punk kids though, but yeah, like seeing the grown-ups throw down, like that's one of the many kind of, like, for lack of a better terminology, wet dreams about the Dresden Files, where it's like, ooh, what if these two fought? And they have plenty of reason to do so, but other than the semi-open hostility from Langtree, like, I can't imagine what would push him to attack. And Ebenezer seems like he could give a shit. He seems pretty secure for the most part, and just wants to make sure he doesn't get away with too much, right? Because even when Harry's life is on the line, he doesn't necessarily openly defy him. He just arms Harry to go do it, right?
Mhm.
So that's why I'm like, that would be one of the cooler scenes in the Files, don't get me wrong, but I can't imagine what would drive them to do that, unless it was like the White Council as an organization was at risk.
I mean, there is the scene on the island where he openly defies the council's will, Ebenezer, which I think he would have done if Langtree was there too. I think he was gonna object and say no matter what. He wouldn't fight Harry.
Right.
So even if Langtree was there, he would still be like, no, not doing it.
Right.
So I got like one more kind of question about Morgan, thinking of it as what age we might think Lucio would have picked him up. Because as Priscilla says, if they're mostly getting powers and therefore probably being apprenticed around 15, it makes a lot more sense that Morgan would have had like been in love with her. instead of like she picks him up at 3 or maybe 7 or whatever, and then she kind of has the parent role.
Well,
yeah, that makes more sense.
She was always one of the head wardens, right? Well, I mean, from what we've seen, so even in Fistful of Warlocks, like they talk about how she's kind of a junior, but you know, she seems to be of some kind of import to be sent on this quest by herself, you know, presumably by Ebenezer. And so she talks about relative powers and stuff like that. It's not like she just took 20 years out of her career to raise a baby. So I think she pulled a Susan or something like that, stashed him in an orphanage maybe, or with some trusted people. And she came back around 15, gave him the test and decided, shit, he does have powers. I better take responsibility. So I could see there being, like, there's no way that, it's not like she suckled him literally, you know, or anything like that. There would have been a gap there in my mind anyway.
I think that makes the most sense. That she saved him, and he might like remember that vaguely or have been told, so he kind of worships her, and then she comes back at 15 being really hot, and he's a teenager, and you know, then he's just
and
never
she's
really
teaching him all these special powers, and he can make things fly around or explode. It's like, ooh, this person's wonderful.
Well, and doesn't Morgan himself bring that up in Turncoat, where it's like, it's not like apprentices and masters don't get it on sometimes anyway. So
I think it was
some masters actually prefer that, he says, even I think
it was Lucho who said this all, but like the way that Morgan felt betrayed, that she got involved with Dresden, who he thinks is a ticking time bomb, and she avoided Morgan because he was too stable after she had molded him into that.
I mean, do we think that Morgan changed his mind? He changed his mind in the end, right? Like,
he almost apologized. He realized
he
that
believed
he was wrong.
Dresden was actually a good guy by the end, before he died. So that's nice. I mean, Morgan really went from a character I didn't like to a very complex and likable.
Yeah, I absolutely hated him in Summer Night, and then it's like, oh, he's getting more likable. I'm conflicted.
Yeah, and I mean, that's the thing too. Like he really is one of my favorite characters in the Files. Like, he's easily in my top 10. And Turncoat definitely did that. Turncoat, of course, being pretty much, you know, like maybe my second favorite book after Skin Game. But there's just so much going on there, and he really does become this full character. You know, he kind of becomes the tragic hero. He redeems himself in a lot of ways. Like, I hated him in Stormfront. I don't really remember Summer Night other than him just being a general asshole still.
He actually tried to get Harry to
attack him and
attack
then
him so they could kill him. Or so Harry assumed.
But that was like a couple of lines of him being a dick, right? But it was Deadbeat who actually see him
later when Harry says, like, I've got really important things. The senior council needs to know this because like it could, you know, destroy the world if they don't. And he said, no, you fail. Just let us kill you by now, and you don't get to decide what's important. So Morgan hung up on him, and Harry promptly destroyed his phone.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. He was a full dick. It was just
he was a full dick. I more remember Stormfront because it's such a badass entrance, and then you know, Deadbeat, obviously, where it's like, wait, I thought we were finally on the same side. What the fuck, man? You know, so.
Yeah. But so to move on to the next little tidbit that was mentioned on Dragon Con is that the archive does indeed have access to digital info. I think we knew that already, and we've joked about her being subjected to 4chan, but apparently it's not the best at handling the digital info. And Jim went on to discuss some of the statistics of like 15% of it is porn and 9% of it is something else. But that issue is going to be discussed later. It's going to come up and actually, you know, take a moment. And that'll be very interesting because Harry's not going to know what the hell this is.
All that Twilight fanfic in the girls' head. So much.
Yeah, I mean, at some point, like, it almost have to be kind of white noise, because then you start talking about the exabytes and petabytes of information that we're supposed to generate every so often and things like that, right? But yeah, the fact that 15% of it is porn, and you guys watch some fucked up shit, let me tell you. But you know, and she was 11. Now she's what, 14, 15, right? So
I think she might even be older than that. I think she's closer to 18.
okay, so yeah, some of that is starting to be like, you know, somewhat relevant and understood probably by her body, if not already by the archive piece of it. You know, so yeah, I could just the sheer information input. So
is archive only text, or is it like, because that's kind of the impression I got, like written down stuff?
Like, or does she also get
written down
video?
stuff? Or does she get full video? Can she like think of a YouTube video and then it plays in her head?
Good question.
yeah,
The 9% I mentioned is apparently from League of Legends traffic. Because like,
really, 9% of the internet is League of Legends.
Apparently, and that is more than I expected or wanted, because people who play that are just fucking vile to each other.
Right.
I mean, I've played like 8,000 games of League of Legends. I mostly just don't talk to people because they're being mean.
Because they're fucking vile to each other.
Right. I mean, you guys are talking about video and stuff like that, but you've got to ask yourself, like, you know, does she get mumble? You know, does she get all of the actual
does
like
she get voice communication? Like, does she have all the Dresden Files?
So
Google
every 12-year-old talking about fucking your mother, like, you know, does she get that beamed into her head? Because yeah, I could see that having an impact on a person. So
I mean, I think if this is the case, and also before, the way I thought about it was that she doesn't constantly get or see this information. She can think about it, and I think people like Dresden, she might always have them in mind. So if he when he wrote down that message, or maybe because her name was mentioned, she it pinged. It's like white noise in the background, and she picks stuff out if she needs it or wants it or something like that. I mean, otherwise, how does she function? And you know, it's magic, and we can just say she just can't.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely that, and I wonder if maybe the issue is going to be that the archive is getting full. Like, there is a lot more information that's being made in like the past 20 years, and it's getting more and more as more people are creating more and more. That, like, I wonder if that might be the issue.
It's the whole digital revolution that we're making so much online, and also instead of creating physical things, we're marketing and selling and being able to make money off purely non-physical things.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Like this whole podcast thing.
Right. Yeah. So she's got all. Yeah. So now we're getting into like supernatural territory where it's like, I'm an angel and I write books about the show that we're in, like Spaceballs.
Okay, supernatural spoilers. He's a prophet who's actually turns out to be God in hiding.
Yeah. Right. Because they went through like 3 stages, right? So he was a writer who turned out to be a prophet, who turned out to be like one of the high angels, who really turned out to be God.
No, it turned out to be God.
It wasn't an angel. But they called him, didn't they refer to him as like the dude who has the Tesseract or whatever? I can't remember the name, but anyway. Yeah. So talk about digressions. So yeah, it would be funny for Dresden Files to be circular like that. I mean, certainly there has to, maybe the Paranet has a podcast about Harry Dresden. So,
well, there's another thing. I really wonder if the archive might become like connected to the Paranet, because I think she can use technology. I hope, at least, because the fact that she's being bombarded by it all.
She's not like mortal magic. I mean, I don't know. We don't know if the archive was made in mortal magic, but I get the impression.
But she talks on the phone, right?
Yeah.
Like they've never had feedback and stuff.
Yeah, she talks on the phone to Harry, and especially in changes, and it's just like, so she can do that. Can she help out? Will the archive let her help out?
Right. Well, no, because she's neutral.
She's bound to be neutral. I think that's like a guess on her, kind of.
Mm-hmm. Right. And establish that. But then there's also, like, apparently this is becoming an issue for the archive in some fashion. And
yeah, the good news to me is that she's got hundreds and hundreds of terabytes worth of hang in there kitten memes in her head now. And she also has the suicide prevention hotline. So she'll probably be fine. You know, this could possibly
totally balance out.
Hey, look, I don't know how many percentages of the internets are porn versus how many percentages of the internets are kitten videos and memes.
I certainly hope it's more than 15% kittens.
Right. And I mean, unfortunately, you got to consider the Venn diagram of where those overlap. But other than that,
what is Rule 64, right?
I'm saying more on the kittens. I believe in that more. So
Okay. Let's move on. I scrub my brain.
do you need a kitten?
Yes. There was an awesome post put together by Old Turbot, which I'm just directly stealing this because it was great and I want to discuss it for the entire episode, or the remaining parts of the episode, about the senior council and what they do with some Word of Jim updates. I don't know how new these are or exactly where he got them, but some of them are new for me. So let's dive into it.
Are we gonna be skeptical about some of these, or are we just gonna discuss them as if they are fact? Because I mean, the wind magic part, for example, I've just never seen anywhere.
So
either way, let's.
The forums did come back up, so I can give you some words of Jim where he's done similar things. But that's like I mentioned off the show. That's the part that I wish we got more of when people, cite the word of Jim. It'd be super cool if they had sources. Not that I don't necessarily believe them, but I just want to see it. Like often it's like a Q&A I wasn't aware of, or something like that. So unfortunately, there wasn't a huge amount of linking. There was just quoting and whatnot. But I've got the Word of Jim compilation that does have sources from the forum, so I'll link that for you, Andreas, since it came back up finally.
Cool. I'll add that into the Reddit post as well. So about the air magic thing that Andreas is talking about, apparently the Merlin Arthur Langtree is a fantastic air mage. And somehow that seems to be connected to his ability to do the mental communication like we see in Turncoat. But I don't really understand how. How does air connect to mind communication?
Right. And that's the billion-dollar question in a way. Like that's where we seem to lack some components of the understanding of magic. And maybe Fate touches on it a little bit. I just considered that maybe there's some additional mechanics there because I've been reading some more on that system as well. But there doesn't seem to be a direct link, and maybe the difference is, mind magic, like what Molly does versus like telepathy. Maybe it's not truly telepathy so much as he's like whispering it to you and the wind is just carrying it. I don't know, but that seems like a correlation I wouldn't necessarily draw.
Well, air magic and communication does seem connected at one point. In Summer Night, and also happened all over the place in Codex Alera, was that people who could do air stuff would create basically a sound bubble. And Rashid did this when he was talking to Harry of has Matt been talking to you? And it just kind of stops other people from being able to listen in. And so it's connected in that way. That makes sense.
Right.
But how is he just carrying his voice? I don't think so, because of the way that Harry described it. I think he's using
mental magic, and I think it's also within the rules of what you can do, like the laws of magic. I think you can speak to other people with your mind without breaking the laws of magic.
Yeah,
right.
Harry did that with Susan and Elaine, and it's it doesn't seem to be breaking the laws of magic in any way. It's just literally communication, just talking to them. Talking to someone isn't, I don't think, ever a crime. So
it depends on if you're making a change.
If you ask Alex, it depends on what you say.
Well, obviously, but so two points for that. So I'm not sure I'm picking up on the whole Rashid was using air magic there. That struck me as a form of entropy, which that would be water magic. And then the other piece was, just because they're a specialist or they have a gift in one thing doesn't mean they can't do it. He literally says that Langtree is as powerful. Well, so I guess he's saying as powerful as Harry, but he is literally the most powerful mage. So he probably is really fucking good at everything else as well. He's just this is his thing. If all other things being equal, this is what sets him apart.
Right. And what Jim specifically says is that sets Langtree apart is that he can get 80 to 85% of all the wizards in the world to do what he wants. That's why he's the Merlin. Just
by saying so.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And
but is that because he's the Merlin, or would he be able to do that even if he wasn't the Merlin?
Yeah,
you do as I say, or I'll kick your ass. Is that like Kimbler level power?
But at the same time, if you are the person who controls communication, then you tell everyone what they need to know.
Yeah, but that's a part of him being the Merlin, right?
Well, he would know things that they need to know because he's the Merlin, but he'd also get this focal of power by just being the communication hub.
If that's what it was, right? But there's no indication. I mean, you've seen Harry make phone calls to the wardens all the time, so there's no indication that we've seen that they're using some kind of magical form of technology, Clark's third law type stuff to communicate.
Right. No, it definitely seems like this type of thing is only what Langtree can do, and this is why he's the Merlin. I just don't see how air comes into it.
Right. And that's kind of the thing. Another poll where, maybe Alara does have a lot of the little hints on what this is, that these are common themes, even though the magic system's roughly different. But same thing with water magic, right? So water magic and healing. And I'm like, yeah, to me, those things aren't necessarily one and one, but for him, they are. So apparently air magic and telepathy at a minimum, we're looking at that much. The argument was made as the other example of the foremost mental mage that we are familiar with would be Molly. But she does illusions, which would probably be air magic. I could kind of see a tie in there. But other than that, we've only really ever seen her do a blow dryer spell. And the argument there could be about volume. You could be talking about like there's a hair dryer and the leaf blower are the same technology, just on way different magnitudes. But we just don't ever see her really use anything overtly wind magic.
And another thing is maybe they're not actually connected. Maybe the mental magic, and he's also really good at air. So if he ever throws down, he'll send a tornado after your ass.
Right.
And we just don't see that yet.
That's kind of closer to how I see the magic system in Dresden Files, is that people can have affinities for one thing or several things, but being good at air magic doesn't mean you're good at mental magic, and being good at earth magic doesn't mean you're good at necromancy or something.
Right. Well, and
they don't have to correlate. They're like different. They're like, you can be good at this magic and you can be good at this magic, but they don't have to offshoot of each other.
That's a great point too, because the more I think about different mages we've seen in the works, the more I'm curious, and maybe there is, forgive the analogy, but maybe there's a light side, dark side of those powers, right? Because the reverse of the water magic is healing magic, I would say, is Ramirez, who we've never seen do any healing that I can think of, but he does entropy magic, which is very clearly water magic and is defined, like one of the few times it's actually defined almost verbatim in the books.
Anywhere. I think it's mentioned in the books that that's his main thing is water magic.
Right.
Entropy magic.
So, but
it's mentioned as water magic.
For him, it's definitely a destructive force. And entropy, in most fantasy, I'm thinking D&D especially, entropy is often a negative magic, like necromancy, it's in League like that. Whereas Listens to Wind definitely seems to be, maybe his shape-shifting is derived from there, but certainly is his healing as per word of Jim. So
what you referenced there in the chat, I can see that since the alphas are using water magic, I guess water magic is related to shape-shifting. Like that's like the main.
To be in theme with the way that Jim uses multiple times that water has to do with how the body works. That's how healing happened. Codex Alera is that the people who can do water stuff would put you in a tub and they'd like shove all the blood that spilled out of you back in and fix your tissues at the same time. And so if you're shape-shifting, you're moving all the liquids in you, right? Along with
you're 70% water. Stuff. It makes sense.
Yeah, or at least it just kind of seems like the same way that blue is the color of protection to Jim, water is how you deal with your body.
Well, blue is the color of protection for Harry, not Jim, but probably the same.
Lucio said the same thing.
Right.
Doesn't have to be the same thing. Harry doesn't have to be Jim, and Jim doesn't have to be Harry.
But
Harry.
Lucio said it too. That's my evidence.
Well, and what's funny is they both say that it doesn't have to be that way, but then it's like two disparate characters that all but have nothing to do with each other. So I mean,
hubba.
Yeah, right. Well, other than that 5 minutes of flame,
because that's all it was, Andreas. 5 minutes of flame.
Yeah, dude. Seriously, move on.
No, they are meant for each other. They were so good together.
Hold on. When did that book come out, Andreas? Because
which one?
I'm going to use this line that I used on a coworker. I've heard of carrying a torch, but the Olympics is only every 4 years. Man, move on. So
yeah. I've moved on. You can have other girlfriends. She was one.
That's fine. Right. She's the one who got away.
And speaking of moving on, this awesome segue I'm going to use, we're going to go on to Rashid. who Jim keeps saying is the most dangerous, even though not the most powerful. And now I just want to see why.
Yeah,
I mean, because he's the fucking gatekeeper.
Is he
Right,
dangerous
yes.
because he could let the gates open?
I don't know if he can let
Or-
the gates open, but the fact that he's like has access to that knowledge.
Is he dangerous because
Like-
he's Vaterung?
no, shut up.
He's not Vaterung.
Not everything.
You can't prove it.
That's such
Yes, I
a
can.
stupid theory.
You cannot prove it. God damn
Yes,
it.
I can. Just because they're both mono-eyed.
Peter Parker, Spider-Man at
And
the same
7 foot
time.
tall.
Right. Right.
God damn it.
That so in peace talks, he's going to nod to Vaterung just to get that over. What's really going to bake your noodle, though, is that because he's got power over time of some kind, he could have
Oh,
made.
no, it's just a
time
time loop. God damn it.
Yes, exactly. So he's a time remnant talking to himself. All right. No. So Rashid is not Vaterung, but I'm curious, like, what kind of like elemental affinity Rashid would have, and if there is one for time. I think even without the gates, Rashid is plenty dangerous just being able to meddle with the forces of time. So
Yeah, and apparently Rashid is the guy who took down Al-Hazred, who was a big baddie in Lovecraftian stuff, which I know very little about. So Justin, please explain this.
he wrote the Necronomicon, so which is the book of monsters, basically the book of rituals to summon things, I think is how they use it in the Dresden Files. So he brought down the guy who wrote the book. So you know how they had the lexicon in backup, right?
Mhm.
So the Lexicon Malos, right? Same thing, but with the Necronomicon. The difference being, if the Lexicon got out, that was going to be hell for the Oblivion War. Apparently, the Necronomicon got out and watered down those rituals.
Right,
So-
okay. But how big was the baddie of this guy?
It's impossible to say in the Dresden Files because we don't have a frame of reference. But I mean, on a scale from Corpse Taker to Kemmler, he was probably in the middle there somewhere. Like, it seems like he was a really big deal, but maybe possibly even more dangerous because outsiders, but clearly less dangerous because Rashid took him out, and it didn't take the whole White Council like 6 times to do it, at least as far as we know.
Mm.
So
With that whole the Oblivion War thing, I think Thomas actually says that, like, while the council got the Necronomicon out and it basically the power can't be used, it was still very bad for the Oblivion War because those beings can never be oblivioned, or at least not for a very long time.
right, and it's
Even
possible.
if you can't summon them.
Right. I remember them talking about that for the Brothers Grimm for sure. And I'd have to go read it again for the Necronomicon bit because I can't remember. But yeah, so that's who that guy is, long story short.
I want that to come up again because considering we've got more Lovecraftian things out of Cold Case, then
Yeah.
Lovecraftian stuff is going to be more important, I hope.
It's the whole apocalypse. Like,
Yeah.
that's one theory that I'm pretty sure I was actually right about. Like, Harry's going to have to deal with the Great Old Ones. I'm super excited.
At the same time, he's dealing with the outsiders? Are they
The
in love with each
outsiders are
other?
like servants of the Great Old Ones, I think. That makes
And-
sense.
Mm.
Technically, in Cold Case, it seems like the Great Old Ones are actually insiders, right? Like, because you've got the Dreamer, who is still
Some of them are maybe. Some might be in, some might be out.
right. So,
Right. And if
so you've
they're
got
the same thing, but just like one's in, one's out, and then are all of them going to be causing problems in the big apocalyptic trilogy?
yes, Harry's going to have to fight Cthulhu, calling it. So,
Isn't the Dreamer also only acting and has power in our world now inside? And he was there. He was like locked away, and he was completely inactive until like the Necronomicon, the White Council released it and gave him power.
maybe, I don't know.
I think that's mentioned. I'm not sure.
I didn't catch it if it was. So,
I might just be
Yeah.
making it up. But
could be. But P.S. If you haven't read Warcry, go read Warcry, and then I'll tell you why. So, that's why you guys need to read the comics. God damn it!
I don't have any of them. Hint, hint.
I have
It's
one
called
of
the
them. I have-
library.
No, my
I
library
don't even
don't
know
have
what
the.
library is anymore.
and you can go to Barnes and Noble and just sit there for an hour, and they won't ask.
I
any
don't
questions.
have okay. I'm from Europe. We don't have Barnes and Nobles.
Well, whatever the hell you call it, Bookenstoppen or whatever.
No, we don't have that. They don't have a specialty item like a Dresden File comic book because it's not translated. It's only in English. It's a very niche audience here. So like it's like they don't have.
So you don't have books because they're in English?
No, we have books and books are translated. It has to be like the Dresden File is not translated. It's Danish as far as I know. For example.
It wouldn't entirely surprise me, but yeah, that's crazy.
Just read German. I'm sure it's the same thing.
God damn it. You guys, I can't say this out loud because we're going to figure this out. I have an idea, but not for the show. So anyway, so Rashid's kind of a big deal. And honestly, I think the whole powerful versus dangerous thing is splitting a hair, and I'd really like to pick his brain on that sometime.
Well, so there was a quote on this post that was about that. It down at the bottom on Trello if you need it, but I'll read the important bits of it. Is that he says that there's a difference between powerful and dangerous, and powerful has to do with how applicable it is, essentially. Like Jim might say that Molly is much more powerful than Dresden because of the ways that she can use her power.
No, she would be much more dangerous than Dresden, not much more powerful than Dresden.
No, he says powerful.
But that makes no sense.
Yeah, Dresden thinks in terms of slugfest with all the evidence of all the slugfests, but Molly can get a person to kill themselves and then forget about it.
I just think about power and magic in terms of magical...
And if she has that ability over a person, she has the power that they would as well. And I think that's kind of where he's going with it. Like, it's about where and how you can use it.
I feel like that doesn't make her more powerful, but it does make her more dangerous. But I guess that depends on how you define that.
All I can say is the text that's in front of me says much more powerful than Dresden.
Right. Yeah, and I'm just questioning that in the way I determine powerful in the Dresden Files, where I think more of it as Harry does with magical.
When we get to talk to Jim again, you can yell at him about it.
I'm not going to yell at him. I'm going to ask him very nicely. I'm going to yell at him about Peace Talks, though.
Yeah, well, he said he's only going to talk to us after Peace Talks comes out.
Right,
yeah, well, that's why you made me wait so damn long.
Yeah, but that's why he's done it. So he's holding off for like 3 years because he's like, hopefully they'll forget about that. Every time we reference it, he pushes the book back 6 months. So
okay,
it's our fault.
Let's move to someone who Andreas is happy about, and that's Ebenezer McCoy. I don't think there was anything really new about it, but there was just a sentence about McCoy and like the way that magic has its limit is if you believe that you should be able to do it, you can do it, which makes me think that maybe McCoy's not really that powerful, but he can just believe himself into exploding Krakatoa.
And Tunguska and so many other...
And
the way he believes that the way magic works is he can make that explosion. He had to believe that whatever he was doing there was right, not that...
It was right, and that you have the ability to do it. Like when Harry was having issues with fire after his hand got burned, he didn't really think he was able to control it, so he didn't. Then he couldn't.
Yeah, like what I mean. Like he has the confidence or the knowledge in the fact that he is powerful enough, and the way magic works is he can make an explosion. And then he also believes that what he did was the right thing, and he could apply it there. It's not that he believes that he can blow up an entire city and he can just like, and then the entire city blows up. That's not exactly how I think it works.
It just seemed a little questionable why that sentence is in there for him, considering all of the really big things he's done.
I think Ebenezer is, barring a few cases, a very pragmatic person.
Oh, yeah. There's no doubt about that. It's just like, And I think that's a hint to something else, I guess. But we just need more books to find out what the hell that is.
Yeah, the way I look at it is just a question that he can believe Krakatoa that he can make that explode. More that he didn't believe it was wrong, that the ends justified the means. Whatever the reason was, he blew up Krakatoa.
I love Ebenezer, but I'm going to be the voice of sanity. That if you think that Krakatoa and Tunguska were pragmatic solutions, what the fuck was the problem, kids?
I don't know, but I mean, would you not agree that he's a pretty pragmatic person? And whatever he did there was probably, he felt justified.
But we now need to know what made it justified.
Right. Like, was there a great old one chasing him both times? I mean, shit, man.
Was it a Shagnasty?
Still overkill. Like,
is there overkill with a Shagnasty?
Shagnasty's the least
I mean,
of the denizens
Shagnast
of
Good
is
point.
kind of small potatoes now, right?
Very good point.
right? Yeah,
Okay.
they only had to nuke him, and nukes are a big deal, but they're not Krakatoa. So like even Tunguska was a decently sized nuclear weapon for they haven't been invented yet.
Yeah. Okay. Moving on to Ancient Mai, which not the person that was a hot Asian chick in the TV series, because she's like
The dragon?
ancient. Yeah, not a dragon, because apparently she has very little combat ability, which was interesting, that she does all of the big enchanting, and she's like the best artificer and all of that. So she's probably the one who makes and
Then
is
why
responsible
can't she
for.
make new warden swords? Is she too
Yeah, that's the
fucking fancy
question.
to do it?
It's like if she's doing like the temple dogs, then
Oh, you actually wrote that. I didn't see it.
Yeah.
read the shit I prepare for us, Andreas. Dear God. But why isn't she doing the warden swords? And who the hell taught Lucio and able to make the artificing that she does? Because like thinking of the two together, it's like, did Mai teach Lucio? I don't think so, but we don't know for certain.
She might have taught her some mechanics, but you're almost making the argument like, well, you're an auto mechanic. Why can't you make a sword? Like it was Lucio's gift, right? Even more than the fighting, even more than anything, Lucio's gift was sword making, and specifically those swords. So, I mean, to me, the question is, what the fuck did the Wardens carry before that? And is there really just this 120-year range where they had these badass Vorpal magical breaking swords?
I feel like in Fistful of Warlocks, her sword is not mentioned. It's like they just didn't have anything. She doesn't she doesn't use anything else.
She has a sword and she has the gun.
She has the
And-
sword? Okay, I just didn't remember.
Yeah, she has it. And I think it's still doing like its warden enchanted function, but maybe at that point they weren't issued to every warden. But it really begs the question is that if Lucio is powerful enough to do a temple dog, can she at least use the schematic that Lucio had? If Mai can do that, if the temple dog, Lucio could teach her how to do the warden sword, right?
Maybe.
I feel like if Ancient Mai is the grandest artificer and enchanter, she would be able to do the sword. And you said, well, why can't auto mechanic? Like, I just feel like that she would be able to do that. If even if she didn't come up with the idea, she would be able to do it.
Mm-hmm. And considering we're guessing that she might be closer to 400 years old than 200, because if she is ancient, then she should be able to have the ability
She must be one of the oldest on the council, surely.
And that's our guess, but I don't know. Why doesn't she do it? If there is something about the ability that we don't know, that's one thing. But I also wonder if she just hasn't condescended to do it, because it always seems interesting the way that she has a bunch of henchmen around her, essentially. And she's never the one
to be really bad at combat magic. Like
really she is, apparently. But she also has someone holding an umbrella over her because it was raining in Turncoat.
It's because I feel like she's she's such a you're all here to serve me.
Yes. Also known as a bitch.
Yeah.
But it always made me wonder, apparently, and it makes me wonder more. And even if she can't do combat magic, why does she have to have the henchmen?
So, are you ready for this? I'm gonna blow your fucking mind. Harry doesn't get a sword, just like Harry doesn't get a cell phone. Okay? Because it would be too fucking powerful.
Okay.
So Ancient Mai can't do swords because fuck you, that's why. So like
what
because it's a plot
basically
device.
You can't have Harry have a sword, but he has to be a warden, so Ancient Mai just can't.
But what about all the new wardens that aren't him?
Nope, they can't have them either.
Well, because they can't, the reason they can't have them is because out of universe, Harry can't have them. That's why Ancient Mai can't make them.
Fuck you, new guys, you're done?
Well, it's kind of like a passing of the age, right? Like, the age passes and everybody diminishes in a way where, it's just like this is a huge blow to the White Council's power, But, I think it's all part of the plot, unfortunately. So whatever the answer is going to be, it's going to be some kind of, unsatisfactory thing. Because, like Ancient Mai's a magical artificer. We don't really understand the mechanics of that. We don't understand why she's really good at making crazy mechanical magic sensing, blood sniffing dogs, but can't make swords. But it's been mentioned like 3 times by 2 different characters. So
I totes get why out of universe, the way you explain it is because it will be too good for Harry to have that sword. But
we need an in-universe explanation as to why Mai can't do it.
Universe answer as to why Ancient Mai can't make those swords. She's the greatest artificer of the White Council. I would like to know that.
And
definitely.
I mean, I think what's going to happen is maybe Ancient Mai can't work the energies herself, but she'll end up like tutoring the next person. And so once Harry's the Merlin, you'll start to see that sort of thing come back, and then he'll finally get his sword. But I honestly, to me, I haven't found a satisfactory answer other than I got to the point where, of course, he's not going to get a sword because then he'd be unstoppable. And, he'd basically be a Jedi in a lot of ways. Like, he's got this stupid, powerful sword that blocks everything and magic and whatever. Yeah, it'd be nuts.
Yeah, and Butter's already got like dibs on the Jedi thing.
Yeah.
Can't have 2 Jedis.
Right?
There can only be one.
Different movie.
Okay.
So
So
actually, a surprisingly decent action movie.
With the first one.
moving on to Martha Liberty, which is a character we saw pretty much once, and I've always been wanting to know more about her. She stays with some of her family somewhere in, I think, northeast, the U.S. somewhere. And I assume that she's American because she's on the senior council. She made them mention that there's too many Americans already, and she's Black. So I just assume so. And the name Liberty.
Say about this.
He was there for the diversity episode. He shared his opinions. So, apparently her big skill is thaumaturgy, which is the voodoo thing of connecting one thing to another.
Harry's also really good at thaumaturgy. It's not so much voodoo; it's energies, right? And she uses it as voodoo.
Well, no, voodoo is just like the easy explanation of what thaumaturgy is. I don't know if she actually does voodoo.
That's racist. Seriously.
I think it's mentioned somewhere she does voodoo.
I don't remember that, so please find a source.
Calling you
I
out.
remember it in a Reddit thread or something. Whatever.
Sources.
Thaumaturgy is what Harry's also really good at. It's basic energies, like finding things, connecting them together, like finding lost keys, like he does often, stuff like that.
Yeah, and that is the thaumaturgy of connecting things. But somehow Jim connected that to information gathering.
To be fair, Harry has done voodoo at least twice, like all but literally. So I'm just saying. So because he does it in book 2 and 3, the ones that you guys keep skipping, asshole. So
hey, I don't skip them.
He does it to the Loop Guru with a Snoopy doll, with a Snoopy stuffed Snoopy, and then he does it to Kravos. So you see it in the dream sequence, because doesn't he have like an effigy of Kravos that he uses to cut off his power? Right. So
and then later he says, "Oh, maybe the Ken doll works so great because it was actually anatomically correct."
Right.
Yeah. But apparently Martha Liberty does a lot is the networking, and somehow that has to do with thaumaturgy, which could be like the way that Harry was getting or listening in on Binder and what's her face White Council or White Court person in Turncoat. Madeline. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, he was using like silly string.
It felt like a pretty small trick, like any wizard would be able to do that, but maybe you would have to be pretty good at the energy flow of magic to do it.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of like a very spy form of thing, but he describes Martha Liberty as being able to have a lot of contacts in the Never Never. Networking that way. I don't know how thaumaturgy connects.
Martha LeFay, anybody?
Just because they're in the Never Never doesn't mean they're
one
fey.
doesn't have to be related to the other. She can just have contacts in the Never. It's like Harry's pretty good at open. Well, he kind of just forces them open, but he's pretty decent at opening portals to Never Never. Like some people need a lot of training and ability to do that, whereas Harry's kind of just been able to.
Yeah. I mean, as he describes it, he rips open a thing, knows that it's going to deteriorate, and he just rips it wide enough so he has enough time. And then there's someone like Lily who can just like, oh, I didn't even notice it was open. It was so smooth.
Right. Well, and doesn't Kel do something like that too? Doesn't he open a way that's like they just kind of vanish?
Yeah, in Deadbeat, I think it is actually where it's like where he just kind of vanishes, where there's this smell of swamp, which then later turns out to be where all the mega ghouls are. There's like he just kind of disappears, and that's that must have been a wake since there was that swamp smell.
Interesting. I hadn't connected those two things, so man, I really got to start another read.
I mean, that's also how he must have escaped out of the big bomb in White Knight.
Well, he was right next to the portal into that swamp in Never Never place.
Yeah.
He went in and closed it.
He knows how to do portals. We don't know how good he is at them, like compared from the spectrum of Harry to Lily.
Probably somewhere in between, but higher end.
Greek sounding words, I remember, by the way. Like I think like Garush. I think that was like Greek derivative. Because he uses that against Harry, because I just listened to it.
I don't remember.
Is what's his name from Archangel? Is he of Greek descent?
Petrovich? No, he's Russian.
He's Russian. Okay. Oh.
I mean,
Greek Orthodox.
Maybe a Russian word sounds Greek to you. I don't know.
Maybe it sounded Greek to me, the Garush, but
maybe
it's
still Greek to me.
On the very accurate assumption that Cal is Petrovich, I'm sure it just sounds like Greek to you.
I mean, he surely is. We're gonna find out in like 4 books, and I'm gonna be like, yeah. See?
Yeah, we knew that 10 years ago.
I mean, it wasn't my theory, but I believed it.
All right, on to Injun Joe. Apparently, he's the person with the water magic, which like how the alphas do everything, and the shape shifting and the body stuff. I assume.
And being able to reconstruct psychic imprints of a murder because reasons.
Yeah. Although I kind of assumed that had to do with wards, because they described, what the way the wards are around the room in the start, so you can kind of backtrace the damage.
Sure, but they still sent Injun Joe for a reason.
And again, just because Injun Joe is good at it doesn't mean that's because he's also good at water magic.
Yeah. I think. And there was also Langtree, and Langtree's like, so I thought the guy for wards too.
Counterpoint is that one of the senior council mages was murdered. They didn't send somebody who was just decent at it. They sent somebody who was the best at it. They sent
someone else from the senior council, because they probably didn't want word to spread about what happened there. That was for senior council only, until otherwise stated.
But why him and why not somebody like Ancient Mai?
Well, it was him and Langtree.
He might have been the best on the senior council for the job, but maybe not the best wizard in the White Council for the job.
Okay.
I mean, they wouldn't want Joe, Dick, and Warden Harry, whatever, to necessarily know what happened in there until they knew what happened in there.
Yeah, they gotta hold all the facts close to the chest until they can get hints out of the killer as to who it was or whatever.
Basically,
right?
they blame Morgan for it. But if someone else from the White Council whom had reconstructed and seen what had happened, and that it wasn't Morgan at all, I mean, that would have been bad for their political capital and the game they want to run or play or need to do. So I think they probably just wanted to keep the information tight, and Injun Joe may not have been the best one to it, but the best one in the White Council.
It's not a bad theory. Moving on to someone who may or may not be the right guy for the job, it's Grigori Christos. And
definitely not the right guy for the job yet.
Right. There's the thought from the guy who made this post that he might have similar abilities to Lafortier, which I don't assume, because I don't know what Lafortier was good at other than trying to kill Harry in Summer Night.
And collecting ancient artifacts.
Yeah, that's true. He did do that.
He had a cool library going on.
He was Indiana Jones of the White Council.
Right.
It belongs in my bedroom.
Right.
It was like the Brits in the 1900s. Oh, this is mine. Oh, this is mine. Oh, this is mine.
Can't be a country if you don't have a flag.
like if we went to the British Museum, like I think it's mentioned in another book series. I really like the Bartimaeus trilogy, where the character says it's like an alternate England, where he says like, and the British Museum, where several dozen items was legally obtained.
Right.
It's like there's just a lot of loot there.
Mm-hmm. All right. So Christos apparently did some time as a warden and did fairly well in the whole war with the Red Court, but nothing spectacular, I guess, because that's all that was said about him. His big specialty, I'm guessing, is just politics. He did the military service. It looks good to the voters, and he got the term he wanted.
Yeah, exactly. Like, yeah, he's a veteran, right? Because he was totally there, and he killed a guy that one time, or a Red Court vampire or whatever. So, yeah.
It's like politicians, like building up their military career, which might not have been that great as they claimed it to be.
Yeah. And then it always looks bad on the opponent who maybe never went into the military, and it's all just not what being in the military is supposed to be. It's not supposed to be political.
Right.
But I assume that that's what he did. Like, and that's like, yeah, I'm totally the person you can trust with fighting the Red Court because I did it for a few years.
Right.
And we don't know how long it is because, like, if he's, say, maybe 100, probably older than that, did he do it for, like, 5? It just kind of, like, lacks impotence.
As someone who's served for a very long time could also have made a big contribution to a war. I mean, Harry was a warden and ended the war he also started, but that's certainly a big contribution.
Mm-hmm.
And he hasn't been a warden for that long.
That's a fair statement. Yeah, but it does kind of leave open for was this guy a second stringer? Did he only become a warden after Sicily because 3/4 of the wardens got wiped out?
Yeah,
and there was nobody else. So he's like, "Oh, I'll do it because shit. There's who else?"
At the same time, what if he was a warden like back in the 50s or something, and he just participated in the war in the Red Court?
Yeah, I mean, I get the. I'm not saying being a warden was an easy job, but that it certainly was way more coasting before the war.
Yeah, you're right. All the 6 times they had to go after Kemmler was probably super easy.
Well, when you have all
he had
members of the White Council
every time,
and then look at what's happened to Morgan, Lucio, Ebenezer. So people who are captains or very close to being captains of the wardens seem to go through the ringer.
If it was such a hard job, they would have been dead. It's gotta be easy.
Right. Touche. Yeah. So what is the problem where Krakatoa and Tunguska are the solution? So yeah, he's not dead because he left a pile of flaming corpses. So
easy game, easy life. Just blow it up.
Right.
What does SCM stand for?
Senior council member.
I wondered that when I read it.
Yeah.
What?
Senior council member.
Oh, that's what it stands for. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Does he reference himself like that? Is he like that stuck up? He's like,
no.
It's like Doctor, like Christos.
No,
man, that would be funny actually.
Yeah. OP abbreviated because words are hard. So welcome to America.
Or actually, every time he's like, or he wants to be referenced as senior council member.
Right.
So you know what? You just made me realize the archive can do like this big, all-encompassing glossary of what all of the acronyms are on the internet and what they mean, and everyone can understand everything else now.
Except that she's neutral, so she's not going to help you on your homework. You're fucked.
And I would have to read through all of it, and that's a lot.
You put it on the internet. You just like Control F. What is this thing I saw?
All words for all time, man. She's listening to this podcast right now, along with 11 exabytes of porn and a few other things, I'm sure.
Right, but we did reach the end of the senior council list, and unless we have other things about like how the hell does this element connect to that function questions.
Well, you see, the air element is connected to the mind element, and the mind element is connected to the telepathy element. And now, okay, I'm done.
No, it's not.
Okay, we've reached an hour. We reached the end of our topic. Help me plug all of our stuff because I hate this part.
So do we gotta plug the thing that
was a lot more funny than it was supposed to be because we just talked about porn.
Wow. So wait.
Jesus Christ, Andreas.
Well, this is a not safe for work podcast. I can say that.
Well, now that you've listened to us swear for an hour, it is a not safe for work podcast now. Okay, so other podcasts. So we've got Dangerous to Go Alone. We've got. Wait, sorry, you took a breath. Is there a thing?
No, Dangerous to Go Alone. I do the High Fantasy next week, and the week after we're supposed to be doing this podcast, but we're actually taking a break because family reasons. So sorry. The next one will be in October.
Yay!
And then keep going with what we have.
Great Scott. Did we mention that?
Not yet, but yes, watch that one.
The Long Haul. And yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. No, we should get like another podcast going because we've only got 4 active ones at the moment.
Yeah, I'm like this close to potentially doing it. You told me you hated the name and wanted to come up with a new name, so
you should come up with a better name. But if that's
I'm
the only
supposed
thing
to come
holding
up
you
with
back,
another name.
we will help you with that.
I came up
Isn't
with a
that-
name, so
Is it the one you talked about before?
yeah. I'll do some politics stuff. I am not a lawyer. I'm not a politician. I read, so that's
You're
going to
just
be
an
my
asshole
thing,
with
but-
opinions, right?
Well, yeah,
It's-
to a point, but I mean, in this case, hopefully, I'm not that big of an asshole. But
Is it American politics, or will you also touch on international or other countries' politics and how it reflects on maybe American politics? And what's your angle? Tell us about it. Pitch it.
you ready for this? It's the politics of freedom. So probably American politics, but yeah, I mean the focus
Hello?
is
Hello? Excuse me? Hello? Are you saying we're not free in Europe? Hello?
Yeah.
mostly the focus in the plan that I have right now. The idea that came to me and where I might actually get it off the ground is to start going back through, like, say, the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, because I feel like some people don't seem to quite understand it. Now, the part where I'm going to not be able to fill in the gaps is 200 years worth of case law and Supreme Court rulings and things like that, which would be interesting. But I think covering a little section each show would be somewhere to start. So
you want it to be a discussion on politics that's happening and start with the basics, but you don't want to be at a history channel.
well, I don't necessarily consider a study of history to go through the Constitution, but yeah,
Right,
I
but
mean,
you don't want to do the 200 years of case law.
well, it's more like Jesus fucking Christ. I'm only one dude. Like, there's so much to go through there, and I certainly would like to do that. But I mean, when we start talking about year 2 and 3 of the show, maybe type of thing. Like, I want to go through the basics as I feel like they relate to what's going on today, obviously, and some of those things. But yeah, the problem is that what's considered law in this country definitely deviates very quickly. One of the things I'd like to do as well is go through the Federalist Papers, because I don't think a lot of people actually pay attention to that, where it's like, well, we don't know what the founding fathers really meant by this. And it's like, yeah, except we kind of do. That was the whole point of those letters. So that's part of, like, that would be the first God knows how many episodes of that to start with. So
All right, so if all that's holding you back is a name, we will help you with that, and then you can announce it in October, and everyone can listen to it.
If you're going to go through the Constitution, the Fourth Amendment is the one about free speech, right?
First Amendment.
First Amendment is the freaking.
It was
Ow.
the first one.
Americans. I'm not American, okay?
It was
Fourth
the most
Amendment-
important one. It was the first one they remembered to write down.
I just you should mention that whole it's like the First Amendment. Sure, you can like say what you want, right? But it doesn't mean you're free of responsibility for what you say.
Sure. I mean, people get hung up on that, but yeah, like there are nuances, right? And that's going to be part of the discussion. So
I'm just annoyed by the whole no, it's my First Amendment right. I can say what I want, yeah, and I can not like you for it.
Right. I mean, the part that people get away from is you have the elementary school kids' understanding of freedom of speech, whereas freedom of speech mostly makes it so that, other than extenuating circumstances like, inciting a riot and other things like that, you can't be punished by the government. Like, I can hate what you said and go punch you in the nose. That's assault, but that's not violating your First Amendment. So
Right.
anyway.
Right. closing the episode now. We'll listen to it when you actually have it up and going. Find out a good name. People can give us their suggestions for it based on your personality. Blah blah blah. Bye. Bye everyone.
Bye everyone.